All right, guys, welcome back to another Conscious Conversation. Now, this is a very special episode. It's been a while since I've done one, and I am joined by Riki Warren, all the way from London. We know him as Rix. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for having me on, bro.
Yeah, it's we've been following each other for the last couple of months now, right? And yeah, it's been interesting because we have very similar paths. So let me just go through a bit of your background. So for all of our listeners that don't know who Riki is, or Rix is, as he's known on Instagram, he's a Guinness World Record calisthenics. It's for the gymnastics rings, right?
That's
The
right,
iron cross.
Yeah.
Yeah.
L-sit muscle up.
L-sit muscle up, yeah, he's a world record holder. So yeah, this is something that we've never really experienced on these podcasts. So it'd be quite interesting to go into a bit of that, but then we want to get into more of the bulk of what you and I are really interested in. So yeah, Riki teaches calisthenics. He's also massively into yoga. So if you go through his Instagram, Rix.official, you'll find a lot of his philosophies, his theories, his approach is all based on the traditional yogic system. Now, interesting enough, in my life, I've rarely come across an Indian who's like that. I meet people that are into bits and bobs. So some people might be into yoga, but they won't be into fitness or calisthenics, etc. But it's quite rare to find someone who has the same heritage as you and has a very similar perspective to life as you as well. And it's all about being true to yourself and raw. And I think Riki will probably explain that a lot better. And yeah, we first want to jump into the topic of yoga and what yoga really is for you, Rick.
Yeah. The thing about, when he said not a lot of native Indians would follow the traditional route like that, it's quite an important point, because I don't think that's a matter of non-interest. That's a matter of post-colonialism. It's very much to do with that, because their identity has been crushed, and because there's the root foundation has suffered, and there's all this sort of imported culture. Now they're following that, and it's not just India; it's the whole world. So as some of the gurus in the past have said, America wants to and tries to lead the world and everything, advanced technology, capitalism, this and that. We are the land of the brave and the free, and America's barely 200 years old. But it claims to lead the world in its civilization. Now, India's been around 7,000 years minimum, and evidence pending more. And our civilization has been just fine all this time. And our traditions have maintained all this time. So who's questioning? See, the thing is, our civilization is not an empire. It's a culture. And so all these other empires who tried to dominate the world, they failed. Every single one. Not one empire is still here. But if you want to call it the Hindu empire, it's not an empire because it didn't work on colonial basis. But the Hindu tradition and culture is still there. So how can they say it's not Sanatana Dharma? It is eternal, and it's still here, and the message is relevant, and it works. And that's so. So I'm quite passionate about that bit. But yeah,
No.
I feel really sorry for our people, because they are clueless in the sense that they don't have the education. Why don't they have the education? They can't afford it. Why not? Post-colonialism. Why do they want to embrace capitalism instead of fair trade and all the other stuff like that? Because of post-colonialism. Why do they convert to Christianity or other religions? That's fine. Believe what you want. But why don't they accept their own post-colonialism? Like, I'm sorry, but they destroyed it. They destroyed everything. And now the people, even Indians, message me pointing fingers at their own countrymen. These people are this, these are that. Have you seen what these people are doing to these people? I'm like, why are they like that? They weren't like that for 7,000 years. Why are they like that now?
Yeah.
Post-colonialism. And until we in the West start to understand that not just the Indians, but the African Americans and the Africans and the Caribbeans and everyone that was, and the Mayans and the Mexicans, Latinos, everyone that's been persecuted in that way is suffering still through generational trauma and things like that. So
Yeah, so let's start off with that, actually. That's a very interesting topic. Now, it's quite interesting because I watched this really interesting video on YouTube, and I think it was by a lad who's from the ISKCON community. And he created this video of what Hinduism really is. What does it represent? What does it mean to be a Hindu? And most Hindus deem the very surface level stuff, so wearing saris, wearing a bindi, going to the temple once in a blue moon, all of that, and celebrating Diwali, etc., the glitz and glamour, as Hinduism. And we've become subject to this, like you said, capitalism that's come in, and we're representing our culture as that. So we're showing off people the fancy stuff about our culture, not really understanding the deeper essence of why we do these things, the deeper essence of why we wear a chandla or tilak on your forehead, and women wear bindis at weddings and stuff, why a sari traditionally when a woman is getting married is red, etc. We don't seem to understand that. We want to identify our culture as basically this, wearing clothes and this and that, which, again, if you look at what other people are doing around the world, they have that. But if you go deeper into their cultures, they have true, deeper cultural norms that, explain the reasons why they're wearing these clothing. So I find it fascinating that his video says, have we just become a bunch of, well, he didn't phrase it in this way, but I'm going to phrase it like this, but have we just become a bunch of coconuts that now do exactly what our Western counterparts do, but just do it in more of our own twisted way? And it's worse because we're not doing it their way very well, and we're not doing it our way very well. So what are we? And this is what I find with modern day Hindus. We've lost our identity because of being lost in this game, and a large portion of it, like you said, is through cultural or ancestral pain that we're still suffering. But a lot of us don't even know if it exists or not, because we're going through the motions and doing exactly what our Western counterparts are doing, but we're not really understanding why we're feeling pain and depression and all these things. And the biggest point that you pointed out there, India for thousands of years was the biggest empire in the world. 250 years ago, it was the biggest empire in the world. Yet it was never the biggest because it, tried to go around destroying other countries and they tried to expand. Yeah, exactly. That wasn't our way of life. Our way of life was following our dharma, and religion was a huge part of that. And when we talk about modern day Hinduism to Hindus that are obviously brought up as Hindus, they don't want to talk about it because they don't want to associate themselves with religion. And it's because you haven't fully understood the actual axioms of what the religion has been made on, instead of looking at what your parents have pushed forward or what your local community has pushed onto you, etc. So yeah,
which is the Vedas.
Yeah.
That is why Krishna recommends knowledge of the Vedas overall, because he doesn't recommend religion. There are many religions from Vedas, as you know. So this is not about let's all preach on religion. This is about the Vedas is the basic scientific knowledge that one comes to know the concept of God and self and self-awareness, and the yoga is the process of the Vedas. That's it. And it's for us, it's easy to understand like that, but we get lost in this politics a lot because the way the West view the word religion, that's their word for their type of understanding of God. We don't have the word religion necessarily. For us, religion simply means study of the nature of God. But so we don't subscribe to one set of beliefs, and we never have, right? And I'm just trying to make sure I cover all the things you say. There's a few points in there, but that one really about Hindus not knowing about Hinduism, I do feel I should make a note that Sanatana Dharma also is followed in Sikhism, Jainism, and Buddhism, and they are also originated in the Vedas. So equally, if we stop talking about Hinduism, Sikhism, and other things, and we start talking about Sanatana Dharma, then we've unified India already. We've already, so we need to stop all this. I think the word Hindu is an exonym. The Persians described us as Hindu because of Indus Valley River and Himalayas. So that's a foreigner's word for what we are. Right? So I'm not going to call myself Hindu because some foreigner calls me Hindu. We are Sanatanis, and we have variations in our beliefs based on where in India you are, but we're all united under Dharma. And that's it, really. And, you mentioned this thing about, English or Western people finding it hard to understand. And One thing that's actually really funny with Chalana Sparshan, which is touching the feet, right? And I saw this video of a student touching his American or English professor's feet. And he was saying, we honor our professors and things like this. So in yoga class, technically you should touch Guru's feet. There's embodied knowledge, and you've come there and you've got it. So you should be respecting that person. And see, we would do it without thinking anything to your grandmother or someone, right? You do it without thinking. And if you had your English mate with you, you'd think, oh, what's he going to think? But you'd do it anyway. And then you'd have to explain yourself. But if you ask them to do it, to Guru as well, they'll be like, oh, this is a bit weird. And some of them will be like, well, I don't know, I'm shy. And then the others will be like, oh, I'll do it because you guys do it, but I don't know what I'm doing. And so from this perspective, you and I grew up in Indian families with Indian community and contacts around us. Doesn't mean we were taught about yoga and Ved. It just means the culture is in us from the very beginning to be good to others and, to follow Dharma. That is deep in our culture. And I'll talk about ISKCON really quickly in a second because they back up all of this, basically. That's why I like a lot of the stuff Prabhupada has to say about Lord Chaitanya's mission. But essentially, you said something about, so we want to follow, let me go back to this, the Indian community thing. So we feel the sacredness of temple and of certain things. And we might, in the past or even now, wherever culture you're from, you might have a pint at the pub. You might do this and that. But you don't bring that to temple because you understand what sacredness is. Now, I'm sorry, but most of the Western people don't have that kind of culture. They have church, but who goes and who considers it sacred when they go in there? Or do they just go around and look at it like a building, like this looks nice? Like that's a very sacred place. And so when they try to understand the inner details of the emotions between something, for example, such as the emotion between Krishna and Shiva, when that story about Shiva came to visit Krishna and Mother Yashoda did not let him see. And then after a while, basically, Krishna was crying because he couldn't see him. They went and found Shiva again and brought him back, put Krishna in his arms, and Krishna opened his eyes and saw the loving face of his best devotee, and they were happy. So like these stories impart so much depth. And we get told them as kids, or we get told them by friends, or we read them, or we see pictures of God, and this emotion and this sensitivity to culture and sacredness builds. And then an English or Western person coming in without that, growing up in that kind of sanctity, sacred background, looks at our stuff and likes the feeling of it and wants to get involved, but has to go through much, much more study to fully integrate into the culture. And in my opinion, that means immersing yourself in India for 10 years minimum. Otherwise, don't claim to know about Indian spirituality in the way Indians know about it. You can claim to know about it academically. There's probably academics there that will destroy me on verse knowledge from the head, for example, who are not Indian. But what does that mean? What, you can remember the passages. How are you implementing it in your life? What are you doing? What does Dharma really mean in your heart? Have you tasted transcendental bliss when you've chanted and tears come to your name when you mention the Lord's name? Do you even chant? And when you chant, there's 10 offenses. Are you doing it on genuinely? Are you focused and attentive? Are you doing it to impress someone else? Like, the depth is so much. Even an Indian finds it hard to research all of it in one lifetime. So how can a foreigner? So I'm not saying they can't. I respect them for doing it because they want to share it. But they have to acknowledge they're on a handicap when it comes to teaching yoga and Ved. And they have to come to our culture to learn it and then try to paraphrase it with the blessings of Indian Guru. And just to finalize on it, because I ramble a lot, but I hope it's all good what I say. All
good, man.
You said something about us. We're trying to follow America all the time. And I agree with all your points, by the way. You really summarize things nicely. And because it was an ISKCON person that was speaking about the Hinduism, Srila Prabhupada said in an interview I was watching, America leads the world with their technology and this and that. They call themselves advanced civilization. And look at what they've created. In 1 to 200 years, almost 3 world wars and countless others, more than in ancient times. Just wars, constant. And we are supposed to be evolved, conscious human. And this society is not yielding what they promised. And it's had enough time to prove it, and it can't. It's breaking down all the time. So he said, you guys have the responsibility because you lead the world. So he said, you guys please take up Krishna consciousness so that the whole world will follow you, and then we will have Vaikuntha on earth, basically. So I really like that. It's like, yeah, you are the lead. You put yourself as the leader. You've got all the wealth, which you nicked from us and other countries and other places, but let's put that all behind us. Everything's as it is. Who's got the most responsibility? You, because you have all the power and all the voice, and you're leading everyone into this new era, and you're not doing it with any spirituality, and it's not working. All the economies are getting destroyed. All of the mental health of people is suffering. It's just on and on and on. Their civilization is not working, and ours has and continues to. And that's what made me passionate enough to research into it and want to take on Sanatana Dharma as part of my being.
Right. So for you, I know I want to go back into the points that you just mentioned there. There's quite a few. But I just want to see, because I'm interested to know what your background was before you obviously, you sound like you weren't fully born into Sanatana Dharma. You might have had a family that was practicing it, but then, just like modern kids living in the Western world, you dabble with the Western lifestyle and you realize that it doesn't bring you joy. So what is your sort of background before you finally found the right path?
I'll be as brief as possible, because obviously that could be a really long autobiography, but
yeah,
let's put it this way in terms of context of family history and stuff. So my family left India because of all the things going on with the colony and things like this, and the situation wasn't good. They went to Tanzania to set up a farm, and they employed local Tanzanians and Indians. And it was quite successful. And then my granddad had around 4 kids at that time, and he came to England because I think it was Idi Amin or some kind of dictator or something was doing some stuff there as well. And then the British colony was getting involved. So the British Empire, or the Queen, said, anyone a part of the empire can also come here. So we took that opportunity. Now, my grandfather, rest in peace, bless him, he was sweeping the floors in Birmingham in factories. So the most menial kind of job that there is in this country, you sweep the dirt on the floor. And he lived in a bedroom upstairs with his wife and then 7 kids. But I don't know why he had so many, but let's put that aside. 7 kids, yeah, in the top room of his mate's house, in one room. And so that he really sacrificed his life for us. And then my mum came here when she was 4. So she speaks English just like me and you in the same accent, and wears English clothes, doesn't wear bindis and saris and everything else. But some of her older sisters and uncles are more traditional. So I've got that mixed blend. And then we've got some people who are a bit more religious and some people a bit aren't. But the basis of the religion is Vaishnava Hinduism.
Right, Vaishnavas as well, yeah.
Yes, and then, I've got one sort of uncle who's Swami Narayan, but he's not my blood uncle, he's the auntie's thing.
That's interesting.
And so there's variations, right? People do what they do, and it's like there's no problem with that, because at the bottom end of it, what Lord Chaitanya did was unify all the Vaishnavas and say, listen, and even not just the Vaishnavas, I think really he actually unified most of the Sanatanis, because where are you from, by the way?
Gujarati and Sonar as well.
Okay, so there you go. So, for example, we've got Sikhs. I want to talk about Sikhs specifically because some of them have been messaging me and stuff, and they're our brothers, and they fought a lot for us and stuff. They do kirtan as well. And the one interesting thing, forgive me, anyone, if I get this wrong, but this is my understanding, because so Guru Nanak Ji differentiated between Krishna and Rama. He said that Rama was the light and the good and the righteousness, and Krishna was the shadow. But at the same time, he does not reject their existence. And his concept of Guru being inside and Vaheguru being impersonal, right? So what Lord Chaitanya did was make that happen for people. So some of the Hindus thought they were God, and God is, they were Brahma. They thought everything is Brahma and I am Brahma. And some thought Krishna is a person in the sky and I'm sentimentally attached to him. He's personal. And you can still believe that. But the majority of Hindus believe in impersonal absolute source and then deities underneath, or avatars and different voices and personalities to express what the impersonal is. And Sikhism is based on impersonal also. So again, it's just, this is the distinction. What way of living do you believe in? Or what rules do you go by? And what is the nature of the projector that projects this illusion? Now, this thing about what's the nature of it, this is just philosophy. Why is there wars over this? What matters is how we live, right? So you got bhakti and you got dharma. You know, you got your understanding of God and you've got your duty and your karma and your thoughts and wishes and where you want to go when you die. Nobody cares about this, actually. Nobody cares about what you think about this. They only care about them connecting and understanding. What everybody does care about is how you behave based on your understanding. And nobody faults Sanatanis when they act in the name of Sanatana Dharma, because it is eternal righteousness, and it's that's why Buddha took it. He took that eightfold noble path and he said, I cannot get rid of this. This is the absolute truth. That must stay no matter what. No matter what I want to interpret about Vedas and change these bits and this, wheel of righteousness must stay. So it's universal. And I think we need to talk more about that. What is righteousness? What are morals? What is good and bad? It's not subjective, because if it's subjective, then we'll all be doing what we want. There must be objective set of morality. Now, the scientists cannot produce that, because their theory is everything came together as it did. And because we are conscious, we have decided collectively as humans that we shouldn't do this and this. Well, no, we haven't, because there's suicide bombings and all kinds of things. So we have not collectively decided this is good and wrong. But righteousness in every religion means the same thing. When you look at them deeply, it means the same thing. And then when we look at the rest of it, what is God? What is the nature? Is it personal, impersonal? Should you pray to this one or that one? Is it paganism or is it polytheism? This is politics of religion.
Yeah.
Nobody cares what you think at the end of the day. People just want to know how to find that feeling and that understanding. And yoga is the process, the universal, unfaltering, eternal process by which somebody can just follow it and get there. And the reason that was taught in many different ways was for the different types of people. So you're a monk and you're traveling around India. You don't have time to sit and preach Bhagavad Gita all the time. So you give them Surya Namaskar and you say, you do that every day and it will happen to you. And you do this and it will happen to you. And then they travel around. And then the ones that had more time and were intellectual and studied the Vedas more and were not so physically inclined, they developed Sankirtan and Bhakti and Karma Yoga and Tantra and everything else. All these different types, even the Kshatriya, so Kaluripayatu, which is one of the things I'm learning. I discussed with my teacher today. The room is set up, the Gurukul, and in the southwest corner are 7 steps dedicated to Shiva. And then next to this, you have the Naga god, the snake god. Then next to this, you have Ganesh in the middle, Ganapati. And then next to that, you have gurus. And they're all prayed to in order like that. And then on the opposite corner, which is northeast, you have Parvati. And that every Gurukul has to have that in there. So they're not just messing around martial arts in there. That is their job, to be soldiers of Dharma and to learn how to fight and protect Dharma. And it's still completely as spiritual as yoga, 100,000% equal in spirituality to yoga, except it's not passive self-based. It's based in a different type of Dharma, which not many people can actually do. So based on these castes, these varnas, I absolutely believe the twisting of the castes and varnas into a hierarchy was part of post-colonialism as well.
Yeah, but it's also we also did it to ourselves. Remember that as well.
Yeah, we did it. We did it to ourselves. But
right.
the encouragement was there. Let's set up companies and orders and hierarchies and leaders and this and that. And it's like, everyone now, if we relate it to modern day West, everybody wants to be a boss. I want to be a boss and a CEO. And it's like, you can't all be bosses, man. That's not how the world works. Some people don't want to be bosses. They want to be told what to do because it's easier. And they focus more on their family life or being good parents or whatever they do. They don't want to be a boss. So there has to be industry verticals. And that is what Varna is in my head in the Vedic way. The Brahmin are the keepers of knowledge and spirituality. And if they get lofty on that, their ego destroys them. But at the same time, they must be given sanctity and sacredness, because without them, we are absolutely lost. So I can't say that they don't have some little bit of an edge on the rest of society, because in this material nature, all that matters really is spirituality. So whoever's teaching that really is teaching the best thing. But so their knowledge that they're teaching and their industry is not equal to the others. Their industry is worth more in my eyes, but their soul is not. They are spiritually equal to the farmer who provides the food that they eat so that they can sustain themselves to read Ved. They don't grow the food themselves, and they have to remember that. Yeah. So they are being sustained by their, they might look at them as servants, but they're also devotees, and therefore you must serve them as the Brahmin. And you want to teach them spirituality, you are servant. So there's none of this, I'm Brahmin, I'm not servant, you're mine. No, nonsense, like this caste stuff. So we have to move past that as well, yeah.
So it's to tie this in, because for a lot of our viewers that are obviously people that don't know much about Hinduism to this degree, I think a good analogy would be that, so something I've been really meditating on the idea and really practicing in my own spirituality is this idea of sacrifice. Now, in this world that we're living in, where it's all about equality this, you're literally telling people that just because a person's a woman or whatever, you have to treat them equally, or a person's black. This is pretty self-explanatory. A person is a person, you treat them equally. Now, the big problem is no two people are equal, ever. And that's something that we have to really get through our heads. In this existence that we live in, no two people are equal. What I mean by that is, if a king decides to give up his kingdom, go into the forest, work on his spirituality, is that a greater sacrifice? Or is someone who's homeless, doesn't normally eat much food anywhere, and is lucky to have food on the street, is that a big sacrifice if he turns around and says, I'm going to fast for a day? So if a king told you, I'm going to go fast for a day, I'm going to go out and I'm going to give up my entire kingdom, is that a bigger sacrifice? Or is someone who's homeless, who doesn't have that luxury, who says, I'm going to do the same thing, is that a bigger sacrifice? And a lot of people say, well, it's mainly, they will look at it superficially and say, well, the person's not getting food anyway, so that's got to be a much bigger sacrifice. But no, it's the king. You've got those luxuries. If you're someone who's, for example, if you're someone who's attractive and you get girls all the time and you give that up so you can be celibate or, follow that path of righteousness, is that a greater sacrifice? Or someone who doesn't get any girls at all, who turns around and says, I don't want to be in relationships with anyone? So we got to look at it in that way. And unfortunately, people's understanding, maybe it's like what you said, it's the lens that we shine at the way we're looking at the world. We're shining the lens through, well, that person's a human and that person's a human, which means that they must be perfectly equal. It doesn't work like that, because if you and I were equal, we'd be on the same pay. If someone else was equal, they'll be on the same pay. But we have to understand, in order to have society, you have to have these certain levels of inequality. And I think a lot of people are scared to say that. 100%. And it's sad because people immediately, either they don't want to get into the confrontation of having the conversation like that really sort of uneasy conversation, or they'll completely just pretend like everything's normal and okay. And this is why I personally feel like this is why the Western world is crumbling, because of these ideas of capitalism coming in and saying this is how it is, and then people now the modern day far lefties coming in and saying, well, we want to go to a more equal world. Something very similar to how, you know, Hinduism, and well, I don't want to really use the word Hinduism because of what the conversation we're having, but Sanatan Dharma, and how India was back in the past, and how we didn't really have to conquer the world because we created this existence where just because two people weren't equal doesn't mean that they can't coexist. So, yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned about, okay, so, you know, the beggar doesn't is easier to fast versus the king and stuff like this, and
Yeah.
that's true, and I agree. But that means that we're putting ourselves in a place of judge, and nobody can know that. Don't know how hard it is for them to fast. Only Krishna knows. So in that sense, that is why it's their karma to do their things, and in a way, that means I like the parallel of saying my karma, your karma, meaning mind your own business, basically. Because funnily enough, I've said whatever I've said over the last few days on Instagram, and then the amount of messages, mostly supporting, but the odd person that wants to tell me what they think I should do and starts quoting scriptures to me about this is why you should not be so on it on Instagram and just let them be and let him do it. And I'm like, no, I'm not coward pacifist. This is my karma because, one, Krishna has given me the situation and opportunity to become who I am. And nobody else is saying it. So who am I? I'm qualified, yes. I'm studied in the things I'm talking about, yes. Am I native to the place where the culture comes from? Yes. Do I embody it and practice it every day? I try to, yes. Right? So, and do I believe it? Do I actually believe it, or am I teaching it academically? No, it's my faith. I'm devotee. So then I look at these things and I say, well, and then I've got world record and I've got this and whatever else accolades, I don't care to mention them. So I am the person. I've become this person. Now, what is my duty as this person? Well, I'm not under any leash of Yoga Alliance. I don't have to do anything that they say, and I don't need their certification. So why should I be scared to speak against them? Well, so many people are. And so they're not Indian. They are leashed by Yoga Alliance. That's why they can't say it, but in their heart, they know it. And I was like, no, well, I'm going to speak the truth. It's not about me pushing political agenda or my own image. I'm speaking truth. And that's how I get the confidence. It might have been another question, but you know, I'm sure people are thinking, how does he say these things so brazenly and so strongly, and he doesn't care? How is he so strong in his faith about what he's saying? Because if you bother to study it intellectually, then you will come to the conclusion that most of it makes sense, and the bits that don't are irrelevant because they're personal and subjective, and they don't matter when we chant together, basically. You know, but the point of chanting, the point of yoga, and the point of Ved, those things need to be learned. Yeah. And like you said, I wasn't taught this, but my grandma, very, very pious soul, still alive, thanks to God for that I can still learn from her in person. And that house was really quiet. I wrote about that in my book because my mum was a single mum when I was first born for about 8 years till she met my stepdad. And my grandma helped to look after me. That house was very meditative, had all the deities. My grandma does Japamala every day to this day, writes little mantra and Sanskrit in the maths books in every little grid. She's proper pious, you know. And I felt that she was pious from my birth, but she couldn't teach me because we didn't learn the language either. My mum didn't teach me because she doesn't speak it properly. She speaks like a baby version, right, of Hindi or whatever. So like, essentially, I picked up spirituality. I think I picked it up from my grandmother indirectly, just as in India we say Guru's presence is enough to enlighten. So being in her presence of doing all this sadhana and penance and whatever else she was doing, I must have benefited from that. And, I do everything I can for her now, and I spend time with her. And now I can talk to her because I've learned enough Sanskrit to speak in a language she understands. But if I was to speak Hindi, what's the point? Because you're just talking of Mayavadi, which is philosophy about material reality. Yeah. But I speak to her with verses from Sanskrit, or I say, what do you think? And then I say the words from a certain mantra or something about this. And then she knows what I'm talking about, because this is a different language. Sanskrit is the language of Sanatana Dharma, not Hindi. Yeah. Hindi is contemporary language. Yeah. Just like English. And so that is not the language of India either. It's only a commodified, if that's even a word, but it's a language used to just help people to understand each other. But Sanskrit is very specific, based on vibration and universal language, which even European language came from, another topic. So yeah, I think I picked it up from that environment. I went to school, they taught me hymns. I got a little gold om at a wedding, and my mum said, do you want to wear this on a chain? And I said, no, I want a cross because I don't really understand this Hindu. And she said, I'll get you a cross. We have all these different Buddha, Jesus, Krishna, all of these idols or deities. I don't want to call them idols because I want to make this clear to people that don't understand Hinduism. We do not worship idols, and we do not worship multiple gods. Devas and Devis are not gods, they're deities. And there's avatars. You've seen the movie Avatar now, Western people, so you're kind of getting a little bit to grips in the last 20 years of the 7,000-year-old culture that talks about avatars. And you've just learnt the word avatar because you watched a movie with blue people in it. Now you know it means that soul can transfer body. Now you understand one sentence of Krishna in Bhagavad Gita because you watched the movie from Hollywood. So that, it's like there's such depth to it. I did these hymns and stuff, wore this cross, understood God more closely from the Christian religion, but at the same time felt judged and felt like I was going to get in trouble for doing the wrong things, and no guidance. Didn't really feel it was my place to be in a church because they all, back then there wasn't as many ethnic people here either when you're young and whatever. So I came away from that. I met a lot of Muslim friends. And that was like the contemporary version of Christianity, which had not lost its actual deep roots because it was a new religion. So I was like, this is really interesting. So I read Quran in English, the whole thing. And then I learnt namaz. And I went to the mosque and did it with them, with my friends, as just to be like, I want to see what you guys do. And I did the whole of Ramadan twice at university. I suffered with them to see what they feel. And then at some point, I became a bit disillusioned with monotheistic religion because it felt too constrictive to me. And some of the things seemed oppressive. And, they would call me an apostate or something if they were to say that you believe this and now you believe. I never said to myself, I know about God. I just said, I'm just reading things that are bringing me closer to my understanding. And I like this and I like that. And then it got to this point where I just came full circle after doing so much study. I was like, why didn't I just study my own culture? Because this has all the answers I've ever been searching for. And that made me break down in tears in a way. Because I was like, I've searched my whole life, striving, reading all these people's books and learning everything the way English people taught me this. All I needed was to listen to my grandmother and read what she was reading. And I would have felt home. And that's what they disconnected us from. Not just us here. They disconnected our whole country from it by destroying our temples and our culture. And I don't want to get into the blame culture either. I'm just trying to give people an understanding. This is not a whinge. This is a very serious matter, and it's like the more people can sympathize and empathize and become compassionate about that, the quicker that we're going to get solutions happening, I think.
Yeah. It's quite interesting because what I found is when I came from the Samiran faith, and I just felt the restrictions in the Samiran faith were only that we were stopping ourselves practicing spiritually. We were too focused on, if Swamiran Bhagavan was the final avatar, when they talk about the essence of the universe and the the sort of the final, manifestation of the universe, people were too busy debating who was bigger, Krishna or Swaminarayan, all this kind of stuff. And it was, again, people that didn't understand shit about the religion, never done meditation for half an hour, dhyan, never done any of that, and then decided that, I'm going to decide who is the bigger one. And for me, and that completely lost me. Like I moved away from that. Came back to it because I found groundedness in the stuff that I wanted to learn about. The questions that most people weren't asking, I was finding sort of comfort in that. And I went to ISKCON for a bit, and I found something really beautiful, because a lot of their devotees, as I was messaging you, I was saying this, a lot of their devotees in the West are obviously non-Indian. And I found there's a term in Sanskrit, nishkam and sakam. So nishkam basically means you're devoted to something without any attachment to the fruits of whatever results come, whether those fruits are bad or good. And then sakam is doing it purely because you're seeking some sort of material result. So for example, it might not even be wealth or whatever. It might just be that you might not be able to have a baby, and you're praying because you want a baby. And I found that a lot across a lot of people in the Swaminarayan faith, not all of them, but there's a good portion of them doing it for that reason, to kind of further their name. And when I went to ISKCON, and I guess it does exist there, but at the time that I was there and the people I was speaking to, I found it very humbling that there were a bunch of Western people in ISKCON that had greater nishkam than, people that were born as Indians. And I felt like it's because we've taken for granted our upbringing and taken for granted what we really are. We've become so entwined with this Western culture that we now define ourselves as that first before we call ourselves as as part of a Sanatan Dharma or Vaishnavas or whichever sector you belong to. And to tie...
Jai Prabhupada for doing that.
Yeah.
Because that's why there's so many Westerners, only because of him.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. No, I was just going to say that, so we want to tie this in with this whole thing that's going on with yoga. And, the reason why I was very sort of passive with you about stuff, saying to you, like, you shouldn't, I wouldn't consider it as yoga when people are barely wearing any clothes and then pretending to do these stretching moves and stuff. I just call it as people showing off their insecurity or wanting attention. So I've always seen it as in a lighter way, and I just kind of disregard it. I don't see it as yoga. But I used to feel very strongly and passionately about it not that long ago. And the way I dealt with it was, regardless of what type of yoga you're practicing, whether it's superficial yoga, as long as you're doing, you're dipping your toes in the world, what will happen eventually is you will come across dissonance. So, I think you posted about a guy that was mixing alcohol and yoga. Eventually, at some point, there will be some form of cognitive dissonance, whether that's because he's practicing two different things that are quite extreme and then bringing them together. Eventually, somewhere in his life, it will come back to him and he'll realize that actually something doesn't sit well. And it's always going to happen. Yeah, anything you do in life, if there are two extremes to it and you're trying to bring it together, there's going to be a clash in your mind of ideas and what you believe in. So if someone thinks you're a guru because you're mixing alcohol with yoga, eventually you'll realize that you're selling a lie. It's because you don't understand it enough. And I've always found it with the people, so the guys that I hang around with in Manchester, a lot of them are yogis, and I let them do their own stuff. I don't try and intervene too much. But one thing I do ask is, have you ever read the Bhagavad Gita, or any sort of course you've done, yoga course, have they ever taught you anything from the Vedas, the Bhagavad Gita, the Mahabharata? Have you even read the Mahabharata? And a lot of people... Yeah, and a lot of people do talk about Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, but it's like, what did you learn from it? And it's very superficial stuff, and it's surface level stuff, and it's unfortunate because they don't have the gurus or the teachers to teach them that. And I was fortunate that I was, obviously, when I was growing up, I was surrounded by monks, because my father and my grandfather were religious, and we got taught all these things that are now coming very relevant. Back then, because when you're a kid, you don't give two shits about this kind of stuff. But now that you see it around you, and now that yoga, the yoga that we know of in the Western world, is becoming so prominent, you're starting to see the flaws and the sort of the drapes coming off. You can actually see it crumble within their own sort of axiom. So the way I've always dealt with it is let it be. but try and educate the ones that want to know more. Whereas you take more of a, Kshatriya approach, which is just go in there, tell them how it is. And, both methods, there isn't a wrong or right way, but I think what you're doing is it just needs to be done. One person needs to stand up and say, this is what it needs to be.
You'll see the rally that happens when one person does that.
Yeah.
When the person has the balls to do it, then the rally happens, and it happens. So it has to be a person that is capable. So I want to be politically active about certain things that are happening right now in our society to do with diseases and things like that, right? Let's not get into that conversation. But look, I have so many things to say about it, and the things that have happened to the people of the world as a result of, and the way the governments have dealt with it and everything. That's not my karma. I'm not a politician. I don't have the power or the influence or connections to be talking that kind of politics. That's not my business. This is my business. So I do. And that's why the rally was waiting for me and somebody else. It was, because look at the engagement, the pure volume of I've been wanting to say this for 1,000 years, and now because you've said it, and then it all comes at me. And it's like, well, good. I opened the door to it. I'm glad.
Yeah.
Now you hear the cries and screams of everyone.
Forward now, do you think?
Yeah. I just want to, because I'm a bit of a scatterbrain sometimes, because I think of so many things at once. I'm sure you relate, right? But
no, I'll be the same as well, man.
There's two things you said I want to respond to then for you. First one was about the Swaminarayan thing. This is a bit of a deep level Hinduism things that people might not get the concept of, but essentially the difference between the majority of other Vaishnavas and Swaminarayan is that they believe that Swaminarayan was incarnation of God after Krishna. And the others would say that the Vedas does not predict his appearance. That's why. That's the only difference between them. Now, again, this is that discussion on the nature of God and who he is and when. So, what in my eye, why does a guru need to say I am incarnation, even if you are? Okay, fine. But why create a whole new sect over it? It's just my opinion, and I'm not disrespecting anyone. I'm saying, let us focus on what he preached. Stop talking about who he is and what's his relevance in terms of everyone else. He's one aspect, one small fragment of universal supreme Godhead, or whatever you want to call it, source consciousness. This thing cannot be understood by the human mind. It cannot be understood. So it has to come down in very bitty information. Now, whichever one suits you the best, fine. But what I want to know is what that person is preaching, not who they are and what special skills they have. What are they preaching? If they're preaching their own stuff, they are a plagiarist.
Yeah.
Because they're talking about electromagnetic and positive, negative law of attraction. This is not your science. We invented that science and we wrote it down years ago, 7,000 years ago. Your paraphrasing of it is your last 50 years of modern science corroborating what we did. So you can make up all the philosophies you want. They're not yours. You're a plagiarist. And you want to call it thingies mindfulness and thingies this, and we can leave the mind and go. You didn't even know that this material reality is an illusion, right? The scientists, they don't accept that. They think it's the totality. So how can scientists tell us about mindfulness? They can't tell us nothing about escaping the mind because they believe we are the mind. They're full of it, man. They're nonsense. Their philosophy, most of it. This is not talking about science itself. Science is not nonsense. Science is fact or strong theory that's supported by peer-to-peer review. But theoretical science, a lot of the time, is nonsense because it's exactly that. It's speculation. Whereas what we do is not speculation. It's based on Vedic science and yogic science. And then this other thing he said was about the yoga, the Patanjali and whoever else you want to look at as a guru. What the West sees of yoga and knows of yoga was first introduced to them by the likes of, because I don't know the exact first person, Swami Vivekananda, Srila Prabhupada, Swami Prabhupada, Paramahamsa Yogananda, and a couple of others. These are the main influential yogis that brought real yoga to the West and created revolutions in culture every single time they did it. Absolute revolutions and waves across the world whenever they came. And there was only a few of them. And what we have now is foreigners trying to tell us what yoga is, using their exported version of it, which stops at asana because they're so blind to the culture. They came to India, saw we were so spiritual and everything else, saw some guy in the road doing down dog and said, oh, these are some nice stretches, man. This is like gymnastics. Wow. I'm going to go and tell people they do nice, similar gymnastic-y stuff in India, and we should do it here. Now I'm going to bring my friend who's a gymnast, and the gymnast come back and goes, I studied in India for a year. Look at all this stuff I can do, like this, all their hands like this and everything, and this. And it's like, you do know these gestures are part of Bharatanatyam and they're dedicated to God. What are you doing? What are you doing when you do them? You're dancing and pretending it's ballet, and you're just adding to your ballet like it's a commodity that you just add to your list of skills. And you don't even credit it. You plagiarist. And then you try to teach us. You try to tell me as an Indian who was born into this culture and into this, it's in our blood, yoga and Ved. You try to turn around and say, well, actually, no, yoga's not that. Yoga, excuse me? You haven't known about yoga for more than 50 years. You haven't known about meditation for more than 10 to 15 years. That's fact. Everybody who is older than 20 years old should remember the fact that nobody was talking about meditation 20 years ago. Yeah, nobody was talking about it. Only hippies, when I say hippies, I mean those that were disengaged with this society and wanted something else, alternative. Only those people. The rest of the rat race and the rat pack and the industrial revolution knows nothing of that. They only know industry. Yeah. And so they cannot teach it to us. It's an absolute offense for them to try and say we can teach an Indian who is in knowledge of Veda and Yoga. No, you cannot. You can only teach us academically a correction about a date, or this person said this or this. And if you've done it for 10 years immersed, maybe you can, because the current state of Indians' level of knowledge is very, very low. But that doesn't mean we don't have the real people with the knowledge. They are there, and they need to be highlighted and given opportunities, and they need to be brought into discussions about what yoga is and what isn't, and allowed. India needs to be allowed to tell the world what it is, not be told. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so it's been completely exported and disenfranchised from what it is. And that's not our fault. That's the result of colonialism. Our part and our fault in that is not studying our own sastras, as Krishnamacharya says. That's our fault.
Yeah, we got too greedy.
Yeah. And me and you, people like us, I just finished on it, have decided that we will not do that. We will study the sastra and we will represent Sanatana Dharma properly. And so I keep saying this key as that final kind of point. That is how we will unify India, in my perspective, is Sanatana Dharma, because everybody agrees with it. And it's impossible to disagree with it. If anybody reads it, it's just sensical. And secondly, on a positive note, because all of this is quite sad and frustrating stuff, isn't it? And, sometimes I think, the world's going to melt and you can't do anything about it. They're going to destroy each other anyway. Just leave it. There is that perspective, but that's not karma and dharma. If you see it, you have to fight it because that's your job. And second of all, this is positive. I want every Indian to know that you come from a very exalted position, as Prabhupada says. Our civilization is the intellectual one. We don't fight wars with weapons unless we have to. The Hindu way, or the Sanatani way, or the Sikh way, right? The Sanatani way is debate. And nobody likes to debate Hare Krishna monks because they perfected that art. Yeah. They perfected the art of debate. And that is our science. We science with reasoning in the mind because we are transcendentalists. We don't lower ourselves to a physical match which proves nothing because it's completely impermanent. Even the body is impermanent. So did you actually beat me? It's just your body that beat me now. Did you beat my ideology? Did you beat my ideas? Because I will spread them much further than you can. You can lay me on the ground so I can't move again. I will speak and make somebody else carry on doing what I was doing. You have to defeat an ideology if it's wrong. So in this way, I want all Indians to understand you come from the exalted background where we have been known across the world as scientists, mathematicians, transcendentalists, peaceful, loving, kind, cultured people. And you are very privileged to come from this background. And if you don't research your own culture, you will fall into the depth that this Western civilization has also fallen into, thinking it's God itself. And the reason this is going to happen by force, not by anything we can do, is because when this society and civilization does eventually collapse, and it already is, what we need to save the world is spirituality. And I say that brazenly. I don't care if you're an atheist, fine. I'm not going to fight you on your beliefs. But if you are a hardline atheist who absolutely believes that this is all an absolute coincidence, and that nature is not intelligent, and that we are intelligent but came out of a non-intelligent environment. If you believe this by default means your worldview is, I only need to live for me. I don't need to help anyone else because this all means nothing.
Yeah.
Where do you get morals from if you're that kind of person? I defy you to give me science for how you construct. You can deconstruct them. You can say, we do this for people because of altruism. I studied biology at uni. I know Darwin in and out. We evolved, and we all based on sexual desire and this and that. As Kundalini, he wants to take the spirituality out of it and say, these things are just basic lust and desires, nothing more. And this is all nonsense and worth nothing. If you, like in the Life of Pi movie, if you want to believe that story, go ahead. But you're going to live a really sad life. And then everybody knows by default what kind of person you are, because you don't believe in unity, you believe in self is God, and that's it. And so I don't trust that ideology. I say it brazenly. I do not trust the hardline atheist, money is God, consumerist ideology to lead the world. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Who could lead the world? Some spiritual nation. Who is the most spiritual nation on paper? India. Which set of morals is undisputed across all academics all over the world? Sanatana Dharma. Which set of morals infiltrates into the most world religion? Sanatana Dharma. Which set of morals is also indicated in other religions, such as that of Christianity and Islam, but in different languages? Sanatana Dharma. So what is going to save the world is the right thing, which is Sanatana. This is the right thing to do. And because we are the home of that, India will be the haven, as it has always been, for the world, for those spiritual seekers. And whoever's awakening now, because you're waking up to this bogus reality you're living in now, this lockdown, if anything, has made you realize, what the hell is this crap? And if it hasn't, God, man, I don't know what it's going to take. If this lockdown didn't do it for you, this lockdown should have made you realize, I need to think about what matters. And I hope it's created a spiritual revolution, and India will lead that revolution, not by religion, by the process of how to become righteous in your own way, which is yoga and Sanatana Dharma.
Yeah, 100%.
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
But no, this is great, man. And like I said, this is only just barely touching the tip of the iceberg. The conversation that we're having now is something that we need to go into a lot deeper, because we haven't talked about how to restore yoga to where it was before, why people divorce spirituality from yoga in the West, why spirituality in yoga the hardest part to comprehend. So all these kind of topics we want to go into. We also want to talk about brahmacharya, which is I feel very strongly about, because I've been practicing it for a number of years, and it feels like in order for us as human beings to go forward, especially as men, mainly as men, is we need to somehow start to practice brahmacharya in our lifestyles and bring it back. But yeah, thank you so much for this, man. Rick.
Let me have a quick note on that.
Yeah, go for it.
So lead us into the next one. Right?
Well, you can end it, bro. End it after this one.
But I don't. It's really hard to summarize it, but I have a slightly different view on brahmacharya, because if we all become monks, then everything finishes. So I don't think it's what is your karma. Yeah. I don't believe that we are. So the whole point of the whole preaching of Lord Chaitanya was You don't need to use all of this life to wait to die, to go to God. You can go now, turn your face and chant. And then it doesn't matter, brahmacharya. Maha Mantra, chanted once in utter sincerity, is enough to resolve you of your bad karma and put you in transcendental bliss. And that is the message that unified most of Hinduism. Shiva and his role as Krishna's greatest devotee and the stuff he taught to the world should also be respected, and those tantric disciplines should be understood as well and accepted, because they are in their own right a method of achieving moksha or liberation or union. Now the thing is, if we start judging everyone's methods of getting there, then we fall in that trap again. So the fact is, if you have tasted transcendental bliss, whether it be by killing someone with your sword to protect the weak and vulnerable and innocent, or whether you did it through yoga and Raja Yoga and pranayama, or whether you did it through being a monk or whatever, if you tasted it and you try to keep and you develop the high class of taste, not the low class of taste, which is this reality. But at the same time, we don't need to leave it. It is very hard to be in the center of the cyclone and not be affected by it. But that is our duty to try and do. I actually think becoming a monk is great, but it's also partly pacifist in the sense that you would run away from your duty to go and be a monk somewhere. But to do brahmacharya in society is different. That is a whole level of discipline. But so I completely respect it and believe that it's a very noble and hard thing to do. But I'm not sure I agree it's for everyone, because then we wouldn't have any kids or anything else. Everyone would just die. So, but the other thing, last thing to say is, if you twist yoga and Ved, it can be used to justify anything at all. Like if you say yoga asanas, yoga stretches are to get better at sport, they do make you better at sport. Is that what they were originally intended for? No. Does that mean you can't use them for that? No. Why is it a sin? Why can't I use it? What if I'm a wrestler and I need to stretch because I get tight and I choose yoga as my discipline? It's still benefiting me, isn't it? I don't even need to do yoga spiritually. When I say yoga, I mean yoga asana, spiritual, hatha yoga. I don't need to do hatha yoga spiritually if I do my spirituality through serving people every single day through bhakti yoga. Then hatha yoga is irrelevant. And most of the acharyas didn't do it because their yoga is here. So, and the yoga of here is bhakti. And so that's like the final place we need, because this is where soul resides according to Krishna. So that's where we, unstruck heart basically is anahata, is where we reside. So if you can find God here, then it works. If you find him here, there's still problems sometimes. If you find him here, there's still problems sometimes. If you find him here, then there isn't. But so then I would say, my favorite yoga is that one, because physical yoga satisfies my body and my karma and my type of person. I need to, you can tell, I have to do stuff every day. It was astrally created like this as the border of Aries Taurus. Right? I have to get up every day. I'm Aries Taurus. I was made to do things, but equally, nothing gave me transcendental bliss or the taste of that, because I'm not always there. I'm not perfect. The taste of transcendental bliss, nothing gave me that more than singing God's names. And it started with bhajan when I heard it, and I didn't know why it made me feel emotional, but it called to me. It called to me somehow. And then I started listening to kirtan and stuff, and then learning the philosophy. And now I study rag, and I'm learning to play rag. And I played djembe and hand drums for like 3-4 years and da. So my musical journey is starting, and and that leads into the sound healing and the mantra and the vibration and the Sanskrit. So I'm mixing my music with my kirtan, and that is similarly the message of the Panchvatattva, or the 5 realities. Some people do it emotionally, some people do it mentally, some people this and that physically, and I try all of them. I've tried as many as I can, and I've read as many religions as I can. I've done all of this. The one that worked most for me was to simply contemplate and be grateful for that something has made this, and that I can actually experience this and think this. And that humility, when I feel when I do that, that does bring tears to my eye on a regular basis. And that's, without that, I couldn't have the strength to talk about the rest in the way I do. It's something I feel. And so my final comment is, people say, just on this topic, again, we could go into for hours, but who is enlightened? How does one become enlightened? What does enlightened mean? All this stuff has been paraphrased, misunderstood, and hijacked from Buddhism, which came from Hinduism, because it's an atheistic interpretation of Buddhism. Like, essentially, nobody becomes God in this lifetime. That's what they think enlightenment means. It's not that. Enlightenment is epiphany. I just realized something about life and God. Now everything makes so much more. That's enlightenment. And that happens in doses. You're not always in that state, because we are not Buddha, who was an avatar of Vishnu.
Yeah.
We are not. So we are not going to be enlightened. We have moments of enlightenment. And in those moments, we learn something. That can be, enlightenment can be pushed and forced onto us by watching someone else or something, or it can be taught by listening to yourself. The key is, what did you learn from that experience? The spiritual experience of tasting the transcendental bliss, or the emotion, or whatever that came from deep in, what did you learn from it? Or nothing. I went about my normal life the same. Then you're chasing spiritual experiences, not wisdom.
Yeah.
100%. And that's what we need. Wisdom, not experiences.
Yeah, that's a great way to close it off. It's just that, it's experience, not just information, you know. So yeah, this was perfect, man. Thank you so much for attending this. I guess this is going to be a start of something. I feel like there's so many topics that we really need to go quite deeply into, and yeah, it's quite nice to actually meet someone who's that passionate about it. There's a friend of mine actually in London right now, Darshan Pindori. I don't know if you know him, but he's very similar as well in mindset. And yeah, it's really, really humbling to meet someone like that again in this lifetime. Yeah, perfect. All right, guys, this was an amazing conversation. It shouldn't have actually gone this long, because Riki needs to actually go meet his friend. But yeah, thank you so much for this, mate. I'll let you go, and we'll speak later about it. Thank you, brother.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.